I still remember the exact moment my father broke my heart for the last time. Not when he missed my graduation, not when he refused to visit me in the hospital, but when I handed him the keys to a brand new $50,000 Ford F-150, and he used that moment to humiliate me in front of everyone he knew. To my idiot daughter trying to buy love with money. Those words hung in the air like smoke. Some people laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. I stood there, frozen, the black velvet box still warm in my hands, as 30 pairs of eyes burned into me. I'd spent weeks researching that truck. Blue jeans metallic, lariat model, every feature my father had dreamed about for years. I'd emptied my savings account to buy it outright. No loans, no strings attached. Just a daughter trying to bridge a decade of silence. The restaurant, Vincenzo's, his favorite, had gone quiet. My Uncle Bob chuckled nervously. My cousin Sarah looked at her plate. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended me. I forced a smile so tight it hurt my face. I guess I still have a lot to learn, I whispered. Then I walked out, calm, dignified. The valet looked confused when I didn't ask for my car. I just kept walking until I reached the end of the block where my legs finally gave out. I sat on a bench and watched the stars come out, one by one. My phone buzzed with texts from family members. He didn't mean it. You know how he gets. He's just proud. Proud. That word had excused so much over the years. I'd built my design studio from nothing, bought my first home, created a life that should have made any father proud. But Gerald Monroe had never been just any father. He was a man who measured love in obedience, not success. The truck keys felt heavy in my pocket. I hadn't left them at the restaurant. Some small, stubborn part of me had held onto them, like I was still holding on to hope. I drove to the Sunset Motel on the edge of town, paid for one night, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at those keys. What would you do? Walk away forever? Try again tomorrow? I thought I knew my answer, but life was about to take a turn I never saw coming. If you've ever given someone a second chance only to have them break your heart again, hit subscribe. This isn't just a story about a truck. It's about what happens when you finally stop chasing approval from people who never planned to give it. Comment below if you've ever gone all out for someone who didn't appreciate it. I promise, what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about forgiveness. I was always the difficult child in the Monroe family. At least that's what my father made sure everyone believed. Growing up in our small Oklahoma town, I watched my father, Gerald, build his reputation as the man who never backed down. Former mechanic, small business owner, the kind of man other men respected and children feared. His hands were calloused from work, his principles even harder. Rachel doesn't know the value of family, he'd tell neighbors when I wasn't around. Too busy chasing dreams to remember where she came from. My mother, Margaret, was different. Soft-spoken, patient. She'd slip into my room after their arguments and stroke my hair. Your father loves you, she'd whisper. He just doesn't know how to show it. I believed her until I was 17. That's when I won a full scholarship to a university in Chicago, 500 miles from home. The night I told them, Mom hugged me tight. Dad stared at his dinner plate and said, "So, you're abandoning the family business." It wasn't a question. "Dad, I can study design and still help during summers." He cut me off. "Your mother needs you here. I need you here. But you've always been selfish." That word, selfish, became his favorite weapon. When I couldn't come home every weekend, selfish. When I took an internship instead of working at his shop, selfish. When I moved to Dallas after graduation, selfish. Our phone calls grew shorter, then they stopped altogether. Mom would call secretly from the grocery store parking lot. "He'll come around," she'd promise. "Just give him time." But time ran out 5 years later when Mom's heart gave out without warning. I flew home immediately. At the funeral, Dad stood like a statue. People hugged him. They hugged me too. But Dad and I never touched, never spoke. He looked through me like I was a ghost. I overheard him telling his brother, "At least she came back for something." That night, I packed my bags and left without saying goodbye. For 7 years, we existed in complete silence. Christmas cards returned unopened. Birthday calls sent straight to voicemail. Until my cousin mentioned Dad's truck had finally died after 20 years. The same truck he taught me to drive in. The truck where we'd had our only real conversations. Him staring at the road while explaining how carburetors worked, or why the sky turned red at sunset. Something inside me shifted. Not guilt. Longing. A desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still time to fix what was broken between us. I was wrong. I woke up at 5 a.m. with swollen eyes and a decision. I was leaving town and never coming back. No more olive branches, no more trying. Some relationships stay broken for a reason. I packed my overnight bag and checked out of the Sunset Motel. The morning air was cool against my face as I tossed my bag into the back seat. One last drive through town, then back to my real life in Dallas. As I approached the turn for my father's street, something pulled me there. Not hope, closure. I needed one last look at the house where I grew up, where my mother had lived and died, where my father would grow old alone. I slowed down as I passed his small ranch house with the peeling blue trim. Something felt off. The driveway was empty. The truck was gone. My first thought, he took it for a drive. Maybe guilt had crept in overnight. Maybe he was looking for me. I almost turned around. Almost. Instead, I hit the highway and drove for 3 hours straight, stopping only when my gas light came on. While filling up at a station outside Tulsa, I checked my phone for the first time. 30 missed calls, 6 voicemails, 14 text messages. My hands shook as I played the first voicemail from my cousin Beth. "Rachel, you need to call us now. Uncle Gerald's truck, something's wrong. He's missing." The second message was from the local sheriff. "Ms. Monroe, we need to speak with you regarding your father's vehicle. Please call immediately." The third was Beth again, her voice cracking. "They found the truck abandoned on Route 16 near the old service road. His phone's still inside. Rachel, where are you?" My stomach dropped. I called Beth immediately. "What happened?" I demanded. "Nobody knows," she said. "A highway patrol officer found the truck at 3 a.m., engine running, lights on, no sign of Dad." "Was there an accident? Is he hurt?" "No accident. Just gone. They're searching the woods now." I gripped the gas pump so hard my knuckles turned white. "I'm coming back," I said. As I raced back toward the town I'd just escaped, one thought kept circling. Had my gesture pushed him over some edge? Had my attempt to fix things somehow made everything worse? I'd wanted to hurt him with my gift. I never imagined he might actually disappear. The sheriff's office was buzzing when I arrived. Deputies in uniform huddled around a map spread across a desk. Search volunteers in orange vests waited for instructions. Sheriff Miller pulled me aside. Tall, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen everything in our small town for 30 years. "Rachel?" He nodded. "When's the last time you saw your father?" "At his birthday dinner, around 9 p.m. "And you gave him a truck?" "Yes." "Expensive gift." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Any particular reason?" The question hung between us. I felt the weight of what he wasn't saying. Why would an estranged daughter suddenly buy her father a $50,000 truck? "I thought it might help us reconnect," I said, my voice steady despite the implication. He wrote something in his notepad. "Your father left Vincenzo's around 10:30. Witnesses say he'd been drinking heavily. Neighbors saw him leave home around midnight in the new truck. Where was he going?" "That's what we're trying to figure out. The truck was found 30 miles north near the old hunting grounds. Keys in the ignition. His wallet and phone inside." A deputy approached with a water bottle. "Search teams are covering a 5-mile radius from where we found the vehicle. Nothing yet." I felt eyes on me from across the room. Whispers, small-town judgment forming in real time. "Can I see the truck?" I asked. The sheriff hesitated. "It's evidence, Rachel." "Evidence of what? He's missing, not—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Standard procedure," he said, softer now. "We're not suggesting anything." But his eyes said otherwise. As I waited, I checked my bank account on my phone, a nervous habit. Something caught my eye, a pending transaction from yesterday. $2,000 to Monroe Motors labeled restocking fee. I frowned. I hadn't paid any restocking fee. Before I could investigate further, a commotion erupted at the front door. A search volunteer burst in, breathless. "We found something in the creek bed near the old Wilson property." My heart stopped. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The volunteer looked at me, then at the sheriff. "Blood," he said, "and footprints leading into the woods." The room went silent as every eye turned to me. They found my father 48 hours later. A volunteer spotted him collapsed near a dried creek bed 3 miles from where the truck had been abandoned. He was alive, barely. Severe dehydration, mild hypothermia. His right leg was cut open from knee to ankle, the wound dirty and swollen. I paced the hospital waiting room while doctors worked on him. My Uncle Bob sat nearby, watching me with cautious eyes. "You didn't have to come back," he said finally. I stopped pacing. He's my father. Didn't seem to matter much before the truck. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. Would I have returned if I hadn't been the last person to see him before he disappeared? If I hadn't felt responsible? When they finally let me see him, I almost didn't recognize the man in the hospital bed. My father had always been solid, a human wall of certainty and judgment. Now he looked small, fragile. His skin was pale against the white sheets, his cheeks hollow beneath the oxygen mask. A nurse touched my shoulder. "He was asking for you earlier." I sat beside his bed, watching his chest rise and fall. His eyes fluttered open once, focused on me, then closed again. We stayed like that for hours, him drifting in and out of consciousness, me sitting in silence. The next morning, as nurses changed his IV, a hospital aide approached me in the hallway. "We found this in your father's jacket pocket," she said, handing me a folded piece of paper. My name was written on the front in my father's shaky handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before finding the courage to open it. "Rachel, if you're reading this, it means I failed at saying what I should have said years ago. You didn't do anything wrong that night. I did. I don't know how to accept love when I don't feel I deserve it. The truck reminded me of everything I missed, the birthdays, the graduations, your mother's death. I thought rejecting it would make me feel strong again. It didn't. It just broke me more. I don't know how to fix us, but I hope someday you'll understand I was never angry at you, only at myself." The paper trembled in my hands. For the first time in years, I cried. Not the quiet tears of disappointment I'd grown used to, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere I'd locked away long ago. A nurse rushed over. "Are you all right?" I nodded, unable to speak. Because in that moment, I realized something terrible. I'd spent my whole life wanting my father to change, never considering that when he finally did, it might break my heart all over again. A week passed. My father grew stronger each day, though our conversations remained cautious. Weather, hospital food, local news. We circled around the things that mattered, neither ready to dive in. I'd taken leave from work, set up camp in my childhood bedroom, now a storage room filled with boxes of my mother's things. Each night, I'd fall asleep surrounded by the ghosts of what our family used to be. On the day before his release, I brought him clean clothes and his favorite coffee. He took a sip, then looked at me with clear eyes for the first time since they'd found him. I didn't buy that truck, Rachel, he said suddenly. You didn't either. I frowned. What are you talking about? I signed the papers myself. He shook his head. The dealership called me the morning after the dinner, said there was paperwork I needed to sign before taking possession. When I got there, they already had a signature. Not yours, not mine. My stomach tightened. That's impossible. The salesman, Jimmy Voss, he showed me, said the payment came through from some account I'd never heard of. I left the hospital in a daze and drove straight to Monroe Motors. Jimmy Voss greeted me with a nervous smile. Ms. Monroe, how's your father doing? I need to see the paperwork for the F-150, I said. His smile faltered. There's been some confusion about that purchase. Show me, now. In his office, he pulled out a folder. See, here's where you signed, and here's the wire transfer confirmation. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but the loops were wrong. The payment had come from an offshore account I'd never seen before. Who authorized this? I demanded. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably. You did. Well, someone claiming to be you, called from your business number, knew all your information. I pulled out my phone and checked my company accounts again. The restocking fee was just the beginning. Small withdrawals had been happening for months, amounts just under the threshold that would trigger alerts. Someone had been siphoning money from my company. Someone who knew enough about me to impersonate me. Someone who knew I was planning to buy my father a truck. If you're wondering who would do something this calculated, drop A in the comments. And if you think you know who betrayed Rachel, hit subscribe now, because the person behind this is closer than you think, and their motive is about to change everything. I knew who had stolen from me before I even checked the security footage. Mark Daniels, my business partner for 6 years, the man who'd helped me build my design studio from nothing. The friend who'd encouraged me to make peace with my father. The person who'd helped me pick out the exact model of truck my father would love. The security tape from Monroe Motors confirmed it. There was Mark, smiling at Jimmy Voss, signing my name with practiced ease. I drove back to Dallas the next morning, telling my father I needed to handle a work emergency. In reality, I needed to confront the man who'd betrayed me. Our office was in a converted warehouse downtown, modern, open concept. Mark's idea, he always said clients pay more when they can see the creative process happening. He looked up from his desk when I walked in, his smile too wide, too perfect. Rachel, you're back! How's your dad? I placed my laptop on the conference table. Let's talk about the truck, Mark. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Did he like it? Cut the act. I know what you did. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair, the pretense falling away like a mask. Took you long enough, he said, his voice suddenly cold. I was wondering when you'd notice the money. Why? My voice shook. We were partners. Friends. He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Friends? You've been checked out of this business for months, obsessing over daddy issues while I kept things running. So you stole from me? I took what I earned. He stood up, circling the table. You were too busy chasing your father's approval to notice anything. I just took advantage of the distraction. I pulled out my phone, pressed record in my pocket. And the truck? Why involve my father? His smile turned cruel. That was just elegant. You'd give him this grand gesture, he'd accept it, and when the authorities eventually traced the funds, it would look like you committed fraud, the ungrateful daughter trying to buy love with stolen money. The words, so similar to what my father had said at the restaurant, hit me like a slap. You knew he'd reject it, I whispered, understanding dawning. You counted on it. Mark shrugged. I figured he might. Either way, it worked out. Your emotional family drama gave me the perfect cover. For what? For moving the rest of the money. While you've been playing nurse in Oklahoma, I've been transferring clients and assets to my new company. He gestured to a stack of papers. It's all legal. Check the fine print on our partnership agreement. I had trusted this man with everything, my business, my dreams, even my deepest wounds, and he had used them all against me. "You won't get away with this," I said quietly. He smiled. "I already have." But Mark had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated just how much I'd learned from my father about fighting back. Back at my hotel room, I listened to the recording of Mark's confession. His voice was clear, damning, and completely useless as evidence. Texas is a two-party consent state. The recording was illegal. I needed more. I called our company accountant, Lisa, who'd always been more loyal to me than to Mark. "I've noticed some irregularities," I said carefully. "Can you send me the transaction records for the past 6 months, quietly?" 3 hours later, my laptop screen filled with proof of Mark's betrayal. It wasn't just the truck. He'd been siphoning money for over a year, small amounts at first, then larger sums as he grew bolder. But he hadn't worked alone. Email threads showed conversations between Mark and Jimmy Voss from the dealership, planning the truck purchase weeks in advance. There were messages to our office manager, Diane, instructing her to redirect client payments. Even our IT guy, Trevor, had helped by creating fake approval emails from my account. Mark had built a network inside my own company, turning my employees against me while I was distracted by family drama. The truck wasn't just a cover for theft. It was the final move in his plan to destroy me completely. If I'd given my father the truck without incident, the paper trail would eventually lead back to the fraudulent purchase. If my father rejected it, as he had, Mark knew I'd be too emotionally devastated to notice the financial discrepancies right away. Either way, by the time I figured it out, he'd be gone with my clients, my money, and my reputation. I scrolled through the evidence, my anger building with each new discovery. Then I found something unexpected, an old email from Mark to my father from 3 months ago. "Mr. Monroe, we haven't met, but I work with Rachel. I'm reaching out because she's been talking about reconnecting with you." My father had never mentioned this contact. Had Mark been manipulating both of us? I printed everything, organized it into a folder, and made 2 calls. The first was to a lawyer friend who specialized in business fraud. The second was to my father. "Dad," I said when he answered, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I need to ask you something about Mark Daniels." There was a long pause before he replied. "That snake," he said finally. "I was wondering when you'd find out." "He contacted me 3 months ago," my father said, his voice rough over the phone. "Said you were struggling with the business. Said you needed help, but were too proud to ask." I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, gripping the phone so tight my fingers ached. "And you believed him?" "Why wouldn't I? He knew things about you, about us." My father paused. "He said you still kept that old calculator I gave you for your 13th birthday." My breath caught. I did still have that calculator, a cheap scientific model that had been my only gift that year. I'd kept it through college, through every move. A reminder of a time when my father had at least acknowledged my existence. How did he know that? Must have seen it at your place. The point is, he seemed genuine. Said he was worried about you working too hard. I closed my eyes, picturing Mark in my apartment, noticing the calculator on my desk, filing away that detail to use later. "Did he ask you for money?" "Not directly. He suggested I might want to invest in your business. Said you'd never accept it from me, so it would have to come through him." "Did you?" A long silence. $10,000. The amount hit me like a punch. My father wasn't wealthy. 10,000 would have been a significant portion of his savings. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "Don't," he cut me off. "This isn't on you. I should have called you directly." Should have checked. For the first time in my adult life, my father was taking responsibility instead of blaming me. The realization was so startling, I almost missed his next words. "After your mother died, I didn't know how to..." He took a deep breath. "I failed you, Rachel. And this Mark fellow saw that weakness in both of us. Through the phone, I heard the beep of a hospital monitor. My father was still recovering, still vulnerable, yet here he was, offering the apology I'd waited decades to hear, all because a con man had targeted us both. "We need to stop him," I said. "We will." The determination in his voice matched my own. I may be old, but I still know people in this town, people who owe me favors. What kind of favors? The kind that can help us set a trap. There was a new energy in his voice. "Come back to Oklahoma. We'll figure this out together." As I packed my bag, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in my life, my father and I weren't adversaries. We were allies against a common enemy, and Mark Daniels had no idea what was coming for him. I drove back to Oklahoma that night, my mind racing with possibilities. By the time I reached my father's house the next morning, he was already home from the hospital, sitting at his kitchen table with a legal pad full of notes. "You look better," I said, surprised by how quickly he'd recovered. Anger's a powerful medicine. He pushed a cup of coffee toward me. "Tell me everything you know about this partner of yours." For the next hour, I laid out the whole story. How Mark had embezzled funds, manipulated employees, and orchestrated the truck purchase to frame me for fraud. My father listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each new detail. When I finished, he tapped his pen against the table. "He's smart," he said finally, "but he made one mistake." "What's that?" "He messed with a Monroe." My father's eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw respect there. "We need to hit him where it hurts." "His reputation," I said immediately. "Mark's built his career on being trustworthy. If clients knew what he did, they'd run." My father nodded. "But we need proof that'll stand up in court." We spent the day crafting a plan. My father called in favors from old friends, a retired detective who still consulted for the police department, a banker who could trace the offshore accounts, even Jimmy Voss's father, who'd been my dad's poker buddy for 30 years. "Jimmy's always been weak," my father said after hanging up with Mr. Voss. "His dad's going to convince him to come clean about the truck deal." I raised an eyebrow. "Convince him how?" My father's smile was cold. "Jimmy owes money all over town. His dad's going to offer to help, if he cooperates with us." As evening fell, we moved to the porch. The same porch where, as a teenager, I'd sat in silence while my father lectured me about responsibility. Now we sat side by side, planning our counterattack against the man who'd betrayed us both. "The truck's still at the dealership," my father said. "We'll use it as bait." "How?" "I'm going to make a very public apology to you. Tell everyone how wrong I was, how grateful I am for your gift." He looked at me. "Mark will hear about it. He'll panic when he realizes his plan failed. And when he does, we'll be ready. If you think Mark deserves what's coming to him, drop a in the comments. And if you're wondering just how far a father and daughter will go to get revenge, hit subscribe now, because what happens next shocked even me. My father's apology made the front page of the local newspaper. Local businessman apologizes to daughter for truck rejection. The article included a photo of us standing beside the silver F-150, my father's arm awkwardly around my shoulders, both of us smiling stiffly for the camera. The reporter quoted my father saying he was overwhelmed by his daughter's generosity and ashamed of his initial reaction. It was all for show, of course, the perfect bait. Mark called me within hours. "Rachel, I just saw the news." "That's wonderful." His voice oozed fake enthusiasm. "So you and your dad worked things out?" "We did," I said, matching his false warmth. "I'm staying in Oklahoma for a while. Dad and I are even talking about a small business venture together." A pause. "What kind of venture?" "Nothing major, just some investments." I kept my voice casual. "Actually, I could use your help with the paperwork. Any chance you could come out here this weekend?" Another pause. longer this time. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. If I was starting a new venture with my father, I might not notice the missing money for months. If he came to Oklahoma, he could assess the situation, maybe even accelerate his timeline. "I'd be happy to help," he said finally. "I'll book a flight today." After hanging up, I turned to my father. He took the bait. My father nodded. Now we set the trap. We spent the next 3 days preparing. Jimmy Voss agreed to wear a wire when meeting with Mark. The banker tracked the offshore accounts to a shell company registered in Mark's cousin's name. My lawyer friend flew in from Dallas with paperwork ready for the police. When Mark arrived, we met at my father's house. His eyes widened at the sight of the truck in the driveway. "Nice to finally meet you, Mr. Monroe," he said, shaking my father's hand. "Rachel's told me so much about you." My father's grip tightened just enough to make Mark wince. "Funny, she says the same about you." Inside, I laid out fake investment documents on the kitchen table. Mark reviewed them, occasionally glancing at my father, who watched him with unblinking eyes. "These look good," Mark said finally. "But before we proceed, I should mention some concerns about your company's finances, Rachel." Here it came, the moment he would try to cover his tracks by making me look incompetent. "What concerns?" I asked innocently. "There have been some irregularities. Nothing serious, but—" The front door opened. Sheriff Miller walked in, followed by 2 deputies and Jimmy Voss. Mark's smile froze. "What's going on?" I slid a folder across the table. "We know everything, Mark. The embezzlement, the fraud, the truck, all of it." His eyes darted between us, calculating his options. Then he did something I never expected. He laughed. "You can't prove anything," Mark said, still smiling as Sheriff Miller read him his rights. "It's your word against mine." My father leaned forward. "Actually, it's your word against yours." I played the recording from Jimmy Voss's wire, Mark clearly discussing how he'd forged my signature and used stolen funds for the truck purchase. Mark's smile vanished. "That's inadmissible. Entrapment." "Maybe," I agreed, "but the bank records aren't. Neither are the emails you sent from my account, or the testimony from Diane and Trevor, who've both agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity." His face drained of color. "They wouldn't—" "They already have," Sheriff Miller said, handcuffing him. "We've been building this case for days." As they led Mark away, he looked back at me, his expression a mix of rage and disbelief. "All this over a truck? You could have just fired me." "It was never about the truck," I said quietly. "It was about trust." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Mark was charged with fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. The story spread quickly through local news and industry publications. Clients called to express support. Former employees came forward with more evidence. Through it all, my father stood beside me, not as the harsh judge of my childhood, but as an ally, a partner, sometimes even a father. The day Mark's plea deal was announced, reporters gathered outside the courthouse. My father surprised everyone by stepping up to the microphones. "My daughter may have tried to buy my love," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "But in the end, she gave me something better. She gave me truth." The quote made headlines. People called it touching, redemptive. They didn't know the complicated reality behind those words, the decades of hurt, the fragile truce, the uncertain future of our relationship. But standing there beside him, I felt something I hadn't expected: pride. Not in the revenge we'd achieved, but in the strength we'd found together. That evening, we sat on his porch again, watching the sunset. The truck sat in the driveway, legally his now, all paperwork cleared and legitimate. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just my difficult father, but an aging man trying, in his own way, to make amends. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I think we have time to figure it out." For the first time in my adult life, that felt like enough. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It comes in small moments, in quiet gestures that slowly fill the spaces where hurt used to live. For my father and me, it began with Sunday afternoons. "The oil needs changing," he said one day, nodding toward the truck. "I could show you how." Coming from Gerald Monroe, this was practically a declaration of love. The man who'd never taught me to change a tire was now offering to share his knowledge, not because I needed it, but because he wanted to give me something of himself. I knelt beside him on the driveway as he pointed out the oil pan, the filter, the right tools to use. His hands, weathered and strong, moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Your mother always said I should teach you these things," he admitted, not meeting my eyes. "Said a girl should know how to take care of herself." She was right. She usually was. He tightened a bolt. I was afraid. Of what? That you'd learn everything I had to teach, then leave, like everyone else. The admission hung between us, simple, devastating in its honesty. We didn't talk about Mark anymore. His case had concluded with a 5-year sentence and restitution payments. My company was slowly recovering, with new safeguards in place and a renewed focus on the future. Instead, we talked about small things, the weather, local gossip. Sometimes, when the moment felt right, memories of my mother. I extended my stay in Oklahoma, working remotely, sleeping in my childhood bedroom that no longer felt like a storage room for the past. Each week, I stayed a day longer. Each week, it became harder to leave. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk, my father cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice gruff with unspoken emotion. "That spare room would make a decent office, if you wanted to work from here sometimes." It wasn't a grand gesture. There were no tears, no dramatic embraces like in the movies, just an old man offering a piece of his space to his daughter. "I'd like that," I said. He nodded once, satisfied, and went back to watching the fireflies. We sat in silence as darkness fell, the space between our rocking chairs no longer a gulf, but simply a distance, one that, with time and patience, we might finally learn to cross. 1 year later, I stood in my father's driveway watching him wash the silver truck that had changed everything. "You missed a spot," I called, pointing to a muddy streak near the wheel well. He grunted, but I caught the hint of a smile as he bent to scrub it clean. So much had changed in 12 months. I split my time between Dallas and Oklahoma now, running my business from both places. My father had started helping with some of the accounting work. Turns out the man who'd run his own shop for 40 years knew a thing or two about balancing books. The truck had become just a truck, a useful tool, not a symbol of all we'd lost and found. He drove it to doctor's appointments, to the grocery store, occasionally to my cousin's house for dinner. Normal things, everyday life. That morning, he'd asked me to help him clean it for a special occasion. "What's so special about today?" I asked, handing him a dry cloth for the windows. He polished the glass before answering. "It's been exactly 1 year since Mark was sentenced. I hadn't realized he kept track." "You want to celebrate that?" "No." He put down the cloth and faced me directly. "I want to celebrate us, what we built from it." From his pocket, he pulled out a small box, not velvet like the one I'd used for the truck keys, but worn leather that I recognized from my childhood. Inside was a key to his house. "I should have given you this years ago," he said simply. I took the key, feeling its weight in my palm. "Thank you." He nodded, awkward with emotion as always. Then he did something rare. He hugged me, briefly but firmly. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," he whispered. "Always have been. Just didn't know how to say it." Sometimes the gifts that matter most aren't the ones that cost the most. They're the words we've waited a lifetime to hear. If this story touched you, hit that subscribe button now. We all have broken relationships in our lives, some worth fixing, some better left in the past. Comment below about a time someone's true colors changed everything for you. Was forgiveness the right choice, or was walking away your best revenge? Your story matters too.